right, welcome. We're here for another Tuesday yoga break. My name is Jen Barnes. You're welcome to find a chair. I recommend a chair with a little bit of a harder bottom on it, maybe one that you can sit forward from the back a little bit. If you'd like, you're welcome to use whatever chair you have. That's another option. And so, if you'd like, you might lengthen your spine. So you might start by lengthening your spine. And maybe noticing the breath. I just noticed I was holding my breath. So if you notice that, one option might be to invite your breath in. You might notice movement in your belly or chest as you breathe. You're welcome to have your eyes opened or closed. Maybe noticing the movement as you breathe. You might notice something else. You might bring your attention to the pacing of your breaths. You might notice, are your inhales and exhales similar in length, or are they different? You might just notice, perhaps with your eyes open, or you might close your eyes. You're welcome to close your eyes or open your eyes. Maybe turning your head to one side. So you might be turning your head to one side, maybe turning it part of the way, or you might turn it as far as you can. You have a choice. And if your head is turned to the side, you might bring it back to center and maybe turning it the other way. So you might turn your head to one side, maybe turning it part of the way. You might turn your head as far as it goes. You have a choice. And if your head is turned to the side, you might bring it back to center and maybe tilting your head to one side. So you might be tilting your head to one side, maybe noticing your breath. You might notice movement in your belly or chest as you breathe. You might notice something else. And if your head is tilted to the side, you might bring it back to center and perhaps tilting your head the other way. So you might tilt your head to one side. You might notice sensation, like maybe in the side of your neck or maybe somewhere else. If your head is tilted to the side, you might bring it back to center and perhaps lowering your chin towards your chest. You might lift your head again. And you're welcome to do that a few times. You might lower your chin to your chest and lift your head. And you might move between those two shapes. Another option might be to roll your head. So you might roll your head from side to side. So you might be lifting and lowering your head. You might be rolling your head. You have a choice. And perhaps bringing your head back to center. You might move your shoulders. So one way to move your shoulders might be to roll them. You could roll them forward or you could roll them back. You have a choice. If you're moving your shoulders, you might bring them to stillness and maybe lifting one arm up to the sky. So you might lift one arm up to the sky, maybe lengthening your spine, and you could stay here. Another option might be to lean to the other side, maybe placing your bottom arm on the chair, and perhaps noticing the breath. If you're leaning to the side, you might lift back up to center, and if your arm is lifted, you could lower it. And maybe switching sides, so you might lift your other arm towards the sky, and if your arm is lifted, you might stay here. Another option might be to lean to the other side. So you might be leaning to one side, maybe noticing your breath. So you might be noticing your breath, or you might notice sensation in your shoulders. And if you're leaning to the side, you might lift back up to center, and if your arm is lifted, you might lower it. So you might be seated, maybe lengthening your spine to the sky. If you'd like, you might turn your torso to the right. So you could turn your torso to the right, maybe placing your left arm on the outside of your right leg. So you might be turning to one side. And if you're turning to one side, you might notice some sensation across the back of your shoulders. You might notice it somewhere else. You might not notice any sensation at all. And if you're turned to the side, you might make your way back to center and maybe switching sides. So you could turn your torso towards the left. And if you're turning your torso to the left, you might place your right hand on the outer edge of your left leg. So you might be turning towards the left. And if you're turned towards the side, you might make your way back to center and perhaps extending one leg out in front of you. So you might extend one leg out in front of you so your foot is off the floor. And you might lift your foot like an inch off the floor. You might lift your foot a couple feet off the floor. You have a choice. Maybe noticing some sensation in the top of your leg. You might notice it somewhere else. Or maybe not at all. And if your leg is lifted, you might lower it, perhaps placing that foot on the floor, and maybe switching sides. So you might extend your other leg up off the floor, perhaps lifting it an inch or two, or maybe higher. You have a choice. Maybe noticing your breath. Your leg is lifted, you might lower it, and perhaps leaning back slightly in your chair. So you might lean back slightly, maybe noticing some sensation in your abdominals. So you might be leaning back slightly. You might notice your breath. And if you're leaning back slightly, you might make your way back up. And perhaps pausing to notice your breath. You might feel your feet on the floor, maybe moving your feet from side to side, perhaps feeling the sides of your feet touch the floor, and perhaps settling your feet down in the center. And maybe lengthening your spine to the sky. So you might be lengthening your spine to the sky. And you could place your hands on your legs, or another option could be to reach your arms by your sides, perhaps with your palms facing forward. You might roll your shoulders back, maybe lifting your chest towards the sky. And you're welcome to keep your eyes open or close them, perhaps noticing your breath. Maybe extending one leg out in front of you, perhaps placing your heel on the floor. So you might extend one leg out in front of you, perhaps straightening your knee, maybe lengthening your spine to the sky. Another option might be to lean part of the way forward, maybe placing your forearms on your legs. A third option could be to reach your hands towards the ground. So you might fold forward so your hands touch the ground. You have a choice. Maybe noticing some sensation in the back of your leg. You might notice it somewhere else. Or maybe not at all. And if you're leaning forward, you might lift your torso back up. And if your leg is extended, you might bring it back in. And you're welcome to switch sides. So you might extend your other leg out in front of you, perhaps placing your heel on the floor, maybe straightening your leg. And you could lengthen your spine, maybe staying here. Another option might be to hinge at your hips, perhaps placing your forearms or hands on your legs. Another option could be to fold farther forward, maybe placing your hands on the ground. You have a choice. You're welcome to notice your breath. And if you're folded forward, you might lift back up the center and maybe crossing one leg over the other. So you might cross your ankle over your other thigh, perhaps opening your knee to the side, and maybe lengthening your spine to the sky. You're welcome to notice your breath. Maybe releasing. And perhaps switching sides. So you might cross your other leg over, maybe placing your one ankle over the top of your other thigh. You could open your knee to the side. And perhaps lengthening your spine to the sky. You might notice your breath. Maybe noticing movement in your belly or chest as you breathe. You might notice something else. And if your leg is crossed over, you might release it. Maybe with making your way back to center. And if you'd like, you might bring your hands together, your palms together in front of your heart. So you might bring your hands together at heart center. And maybe as you're inhaling, you might bring your arms up overhead. And perhaps as you exhale, you might bring your arms down and around, back by your sides, and then back to heart center. And you're welcome to do that a few more times. Maybe inhaling, you might bring your arms up overhead. Perhaps exhaling, you might bring your arms down and around and then back to heart center. Maybe inhaling, you might lift up. Perhaps exhaling, you might bring your arms down and around by your sides. And you're welcome to do one more. Perhaps pausing to notice your breath. You might place your right hand on your heart, maybe your left hand on your belly. And you might pause to notice your breath. Maybe noticing movement in your belly and chest as you breathe. You're welcome to stay here longer if you'd like. It's been my pleasure to guide your practice today. Peace. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you next Tuesday. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already, and please share. Invite your friends.